Hello and welcome to the Box Score. I'm your host, Hannah Brewitt. On today's episode, we'll cover all the latest news in sports, from the Los Angeles Dodgers World Series win to all the questions surrounding the 2021 NBA season. Don't move your seat, you won't want to miss it. For the first time since 1988, the Los Angeles Dodgers are World Series champions. The Dodgers defeated the Tampa Bay Rays in 6 of some of the most exciting World Series games that I can remember. When you take a team like the Dodgers, a team that has a $107.9 million payroll, a team that finished the regular season with the best record in Major League Baseball, a team that has appeared in 3 of the last 4 World Series, a team that is managed by a World Series champion himself, Dave Roberts, and led by stars like Mookie Betts and Clayton Kershaw. Stack all of that against the Rays, a team with a mere $28.3 million payroll, which, keep in mind, is roughly the equivalent of what Betts and Kershaw alone made in 2020. A team that reached the World Series for just the second time in franchise history. Most baseball fans expected the Dodgers to top the Rays easily, and I was just hoping they would win even one game. But this 2020 Rays team was something special. They became the perfect underdog story and gave baseball fans across the country something to root for. To get to the World Series, they had to battle 5 games against the New York Yankees and then top the Houston Astros in 7 games off a 3-game losing streak in the ALCS, all while being confined to pandemic restrictions and COVID-19 protocol. Needless to say, the road wasn't easy. But like I said, this Rays team was resilient. They had that won't quit attitude that you can't help but love, or at least respect. They carried this attitude into the World Series, and though they didn't win, there were times when it looked like they just might. The series was played at a neutral site in Texas, and the limited fans in the stands appeared to be in favor of the Dodgers. But the Rays played as though they were at a packed-out Tropicana field, like how baseball stadiums are supposed to look during the World Series. And the Rays were able to channel excitement and electricity without all of that. They fed off each other's energy in a way that only great teams with great chemistry can do. Look at Randy Arozarena. The guy was like lightning in a bottle. In case you forgot, Arozarena started the 2020 2.0 season with COVID-19. Not a hot start. He wasn't called up until late August, when he came out of nowhere and went 18 for 64 in 23 regular season games with 7 homers and 11 RBIs. But then he really popped off in the playoffs, smashing multiple postseason records in the process. To put it in perspective, Arozarena hit .377 with 10 homers, 14 RBIs, and 19 runs scored. The rest of the Rays all together hit .189 with 24, 63, and 60. But the perfect embodiment of the spirit of this Rays team was seen at the end of Game 4. The Rays were trailing 7-6 in the 9th inning with 2 on and 2 out, and the self-proclaimed last guy on the bench headed to the plate. Brett Phillips, a Tampa Bay native, hadn't had an at-bat in nearly 3 weeks, and he hadn't gotten a hit in nearly a month. But yet he managed to hit a ball to shallow right center, which was misplayed by center fielder Chris Taylor. Kevin Kiermaier scored the tying run as Arozarena rounded third, and what happened next looked straight out of a Division III college baseball game. Dodgers catcher Will Smith completely missed the ball thrown into home, and his pitcher was nowhere to be found as backup. Arozarena had just enough time to slide headfirst into home plate and bring the series up to 2-2. And just like that, the Tampa Bay Rays made baseball fun again. No, they didn't win the whole thing, but that Game 4 was so out of the ordinary and so exciting that they gave baseball fans something to cheer for. And that's something that I think all of us could use these days. And yes, you're probably thinking, what about the people that were cheering for the Dodgers? Well, later in the show, we'll hear from Jacqueline Galvin for more on that. But I, for one, enjoyed my few weeks as a Tampa Bay Rays fan. After the break, we'll hear from Avi Kargloth for more on the upcoming NBA season. Stay with us.
Hey, we're your roomies, your homies, your new living best.
We live here too.
Thanks.
Liz!
Action.
Do you have any idea what time it is?
It's time.
7. Oh, 7? It would mean a lot to me if you guys watch.
Welcome back to the Box Score. In any normal year, the NBA season ends at the start of summer with a long off season and an opening night in October. Yet here we are in November and the upcoming season is still looking like one big question mark. Avikar Gloth is in studio with the top 5 biggest questions that stand between now and this season. Avi, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Hannah. Today I'll be talking about the top 5 questions the NBA must answer between now and the start of next season. Coming in at number 5, the COVID protocols. What's going to happen? During the season, the NFL had to change a lot of their games to readjust due to positive COVID tests popping up. What's the NBA going to do? Maybe one idea is designating 2 weeks at the end of the regular season for makeup games. Also, what happens if during the regular season a player or a coach or a trainer comes up with a positive test? And also, at what point does a game get moved? How many positive tests need to happen on one team or one set of teams in order to move a game? Television partners for the NBA, they need games to show, and communication between all these networks and these teams that are going to be playing each other, that's going to need to be really, really important. Coming in at number 4, the fans. Will there be fans at games? Commissioner Adam Silver says that rapid testing is needed to get fans into seats, and that means a test is administered, and then minutes later you find out if it's positive or negative. So Silver still needs to see a lot more work done on that front. Also, different areas have different crowd restrictions. Is there going to be one blanket policy of no fans allowed in every arena, or are they going to allow fans in certain locations in cities where their local governments have said it's acceptable to hold certain gatherings? Coming in at number 3, the salary cap situation. What is going to happen with the salary cap situation is going to directly affect what happens in free agency. There's been a lot of talk about artificially keeping the salary cap at about the same level that it was last year, because otherwise, if the salary cap dips, that'll put a lot more teams into the luxury tax and the repeating luxury tax, which means there's not going to be a lot of big contracts handed out, significantly hurting the players. There's not a lot of top flight players this offseason as it is, but big contracts and larger annual salaries are going to be harder, especially if that salary is not artificially boosted. Again, free agency cannot begin until this question's answered. So super, super important. Number 2 is the NBA draft. We do have some answers about this. November 18th is the new draft date, and we know that there's been a limit to 10 total in-person meetings that teams can have with prospective players, maxing out at 2 visits per singular player. And these are making the draft preparations seem more like pro days like they have in the NFL, and that's really tricky for teams, especially considering there's no clear consensus top pick for the Minnesota Timberwolves. LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards, those are names being discussed. Also, the Golden State Warriors, they have the 2nd pick. Are they going to trade that pick? Obi Toppin is available. James Wiseman's available. There are some names there that Golden State could take, or they could try to trade for a veteran to help them win now. There's a lot of moving parts to the NBA draft that have never been in play before. It's going to be an all-virtual draft, and we'll see how this affects who gets drafted and to whom. And finally, of course, the number 1 question is, when will the season start? The NBA fears that delaying the season until January could cost the league between $500 million and $1 billion. Pick your poison. The finals ended on October 11th. That's not a super long time ago. League TV partners also don't want the end of the playoffs interfering with the Tokyo Olympics, which are scheduled to happen in summer of 2021. And how many games are going to happen, depending on where it starts, it's going to change. Is it going to be 72 games? Is it going to be 50 games? If it's on the lower end, that's probably not a good thing for players. There's a lot of questions that the NBA needs to address, and most we don't have answers to right now. But we can only hope that the NBA will be back as normal as possible. Hannah, back to you.
Thanks, Avi. You know, you make a lot of great points. It's crazy that we're almost headed into December nearly, and there's still questions. Will it start at Christmas week? The players have problems with that. Literally just one big question mark. And since, unlike the NBA, we can't put our box score cast in a bubble of our own, I met up with Madison Roy, Brenna Shelton, and Cooper Sherman via Zoom to chat about what NFL teams are pretenders and which ones are contenders. After that, you'll see our new segment, Spoiled, featuring Avi and Michael Lagerwell. Let's take a look.
Thank you guys so much for joining me. You know, we're not even halfway through the NFL season, but it's never too early to start talking about which teams are playoff contenders and which ones are just pretenders. Now we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are undefeated. That's a shoo-in for the playoffs. We have the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. But I kind of want to focus on these bubble teams that will they, won't they, that are kind of middle of the road. So why don't we start with the Dolphins? What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I have the Dolphins down as contenders for the playoffs this season. With Tua in, I think he can definitely lead them to the playoffs. As he gets more comfortable with his team, I think he'll be able to show what he has to offer. They have some winnable games coming up. On Sunday, Tua had 248 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 35 rushing yards. I really think that as he goes out throughout this season, he's going to improve and he's going to be able to take this team to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, he's a young kid. He's got great potential. He scrambles well in the pocket. He reads the field well. He has a great completion rate. I think right now it's going to come down to whether he can perform under pressure or not. We've seen that he has the potential to do these things and take this team far, but I'm not so certain if he has enough time this season to fall into that leadership role as a quarterback or the experience either as a rookie.
Yeah, I think they're contenders. They've had some good wins against the Rams. They had a very close game against the Seahawks. Only lost that one by 8. So like right now, they are have a better record than the Patriots right now. So if they can't win the division over the Bills, I think they could very possibly be a wild card team this season.
This is, you know, the first time in so long that the Patriots aren't a shoo-in for the playoffs. They look, quite frankly, really bad. I mean, there's a lot of teams that I think are in that will they, won't they spot, but the Patriots are just one that's so surprising because you just don't expect it. But on the other hand, you have the teams that you expect to do terrible, like the Browns, and they're honestly looking like they could go either way.
See, now for me, I have the Browns down as total pretenders. I mean, look, they had a great last season. I think they're building. I think that they can get there at some point. But when it comes to the Browns, they need to find their running game again. They've had some crucial losses that you could say were close, but just come down to poor gameplay. So I think when we talk about, sure, oh, they lost in the last few minutes, or it was a close game, it was tight, that doesn't matter when it gets into that nitty gritty playoff time. And while I think that is it possible? Sure. But with the games coming up and after the loss to Baltimore and the Raiders and the Ravens, I'm not sold that they could, go to the Super Bowl and beat someone like the Chiefs.
I agree with you. I think Baker Mayfield is unreliable. The team always finds a way to mess up in the last few couple of games of the season, and I don't see them being able to make the playoffs. When they're losing to these big teams, they're only putting about 6 or 7 points on the board, and you can't win games like that. You got to score more points, and I just don't see them making it to the playoffs. I really don't think that they're going to be able to have what it takes.
I think Baker Mayfield's been way too inconsistent this season. He's had some good games, but he's also had some really bad games, and more bad games than good games. Last game against the Raiders, he only had 122 yards passing, no touchdowns, no interceptions, completion rate of 48%. And at the Bengals, 2 weeks ago, he had a great game with 5 touchdowns, 297 yards. But I don't think he's going to be able to perform consistently over this season.
I think it's more than just Baker Mayfield. I mean, the defense hasn't been doing great either. They've been giving up a lot of points. I don't know if you guys watched that Cowboys game. I think they gave up 49 points, and the Cowboys aren't a great team, you know. You can't rely on Baker Mayfield. You can't rely on the defense. So what do you have? And honestly, it comes down to nothing. And then finally, you have the Raiders is the last team I want to talk about because they did beat the Chiefs, which is a tough game to play. But, you know, I don't see them going any further. They lost to the Patriots. So it's like, what do you guys see in the Raiders?
I think they have a really good running game with Josh Jacobs. He has 588 rushing yards. He leads the team in rushing yards. I think that if they played the Patriots again, they would absolutely blow them out and smoke them. I think that was just a weird loss when the Patriots actually looked good at the beginning of the season, and now they're absolutely atrocious. So I think that if they keep winning games, they have a tough schedule, so they have lost a couple of games, but I really do think that they've held their own against teams like KC. They beat them, and not even just beat them, they really competed with them the entire game.
They beat the Chargers too. So, I mean, they do, I think, have a really good chance. I think what it's going to come down to is can they keep performing and stay consistent? They have had a couple of really good wins, couple of hard wins to make. It's more so now, again, like I've been saying this whole time, is it's these teams that are unfamiliar with a playoff atmosphere, with that kind of pressure. And it begs the question if the no fans or having fans is going to impact that gameplay too. I think it's a lot better and a lot easier to perform well when it's basically a scrimmage when no one's there. So it's definitely way different than this season than it ever has been before. And so for me, with all 3 of these teams, honestly, I think it's going to come down to can they do it and can they get there while they're doing these games that are basically practice scrimmages. This is going to be the easiest it's ever going to get. And I think that there are these bubble teams that we haven't seen in the playoffs, or not as often in the playoffs as years before.
Let's not forget about tight end Darren Waller, which doesn't get a lot of coverage. He's been on my fantasy team, and he's been one of the only players that's consistently done well in games. Yeah, he's been one of the top ranked tight ends this season. So he's going to need to be very huge with the Raiders going forward. Talk about that nail-biting win against the Chargers last week. I think it was Mike Williams' touchdown that was reversed late at the end of the game. If he makes that catch, then the Raiders don't win that game. But I think the Raiders have been able to hang in tough situations. But we'll see if they'll be able to keep it up going forward.
Alrighty, well, thank you guys so much for joining me today. And before we wrap up our virtual segment, I'm going to toss things over to Avi Kargloth and Michael Lagerwell for our new segment called Spoiled. We'll see you next time.
Welcome to Spoiled, where we look at a moment in sports where a player or a team was on the verge of an incredible accomplishment, had it ruined, and the ramifications that followed. I'm Avi Kargloth, and with me now is my good friend Michael Lagerwell. Mikey, how you doing today, man?
So I'm doing all right. I'm really excited for this because I like to think I know a lot about sports, but I'm excited to learn something new.
Today, we're going to be talking about Armando Galarraga's 28-out perfect game is how it's commonly known, and the blown call by Jim Joyce that prevented a perfect game from happening. It spoiled it, hence the name Spoiled. Like what I did
see
there,
what
right?
you did there.
Indeed. So in order to first get to that moment, we have to go back and you have to get some more information about Armando Galarraga and who he was, because the background coming into this game, there's a lot of background coming in.
Well, yeah, because from what I remember is that Armando Galarraga was a nobody. It's not like Armando Galarraga was some top prospect and like people are like, oh, Armando Galarraga's pitching, I better be watching. Nah, I remember he was terrible.
Armando Galarraga, he was born and raised in Venezuela, and he was considered pretty good for his age. And he actually was signed as an amateur free agent on October 31st, 1998, when he was 16 years old.
Wow.
And he was signed by the Montreal Expos.
I love a good Expos player. I feel like every interesting player played for the Expos. Pedro Martinez, Expos. Larry Walker, Expos. Moises Alou, Expos.
December 7th, 2005, Alfonso Soriano gets traded from the Texas Rangers to the Washington Nationals. And in that trade, two big leaguers got sent over to Texas, Brad Wilkerson and Termel Sledge.
Great name.
Great names. And in that deal, there was also a minor league pitcher by the name of Armando Galarraga. So Armando Galarraga was in the Alfonso Soriano trade. The Expos didn't trade him. The Nationals did. And they traded him to the Texas Rangers.
Great trade by the Nationals.
So Galarraga gets to the Rangers in December of 2005. He's in the Rangers minor league system for a couple of years. And then he gets called up and he makes his major league debut on September 17th, 2007 on the Rangers. He faces Oakland. He went one inning, had one walk through 12 pitches. And that would be one of the 3 games he played that year with the Rangers. He played in 3 games, including one start, his first major league start. He didn't get a decision in any of his games. He had a 6.23 ERA. He went 8 2/3 innings, and he had 6 strikeouts.
Yeah, that's it's not a hot start.
On February 5th, 2008, he gets traded to the Tigers for a guy named Michael Hernandez, who was a Double-A player at the time and who never made it to the big leagues. But yeah, that's when he got.
So the Tigers won the trade. That's what I'm hearing.
He just has to pitch one game in the big leagues for them to win that trade. So good for him. So February of 2008, he gets dealt. He starts the season in the minors. And then in April 16th, 2008, he gets called up for Dontrelle Willis, who was one of their starting pitchers.
The D train. Love me some Dontrelle Willis.
If you love some Dontrelle Willis is in this story a couple of times. You're gonna like this.
Love that.
Galarraga stayed in the big leagues for 2008, and he had a pretty good year. He played in 30 games, 28 of which were starts. He finishes the season 13-7, a 3.73 ERA, 178 2/3 innings with 126 strikeouts. And to top it all off, he finishes that season tied for 4th in the AL Rookie of the Year race. June 2nd, 2010 at Comerica Park in Detroit, Michigan.
You could say this brings us to a moment in history.
You could say that, yes. So entering that date, Galarraga's stats on the season, he's 1-1. He's got a 4.50 ERA. This is across 12 innings pitched, and he's allowed 6 earned runs. Now, another important thing coming into this game, as of that date, there had only been 18 perfect games ever as of June 2nd, 2010.
That's not a lot.
No, it's not a lot. Think of how long baseball's been around. So the game starts. Second inning, Miguel Cabrera hits a solo shot, and it's 1-0. And all of a sudden, nobody else can score, and Galarraga's dicing everyone up. He's not getting a lot of strikeouts. He's gotten a couple of line outs, a couple of flats, a bunch of ground balls. He's cruising. And the game is still 1-0, though. Nobody scores until the 8th inning, the bottom of the 8th inning. The Tigers are able to scratch 2 more runs across to make it 3-0. They get to the 9th inning, and Armando Galarraga's perfect. And everyone's like, oh my God, like this could be a thing. So here comes batter number 27. The last man in the Indians lineup. He's a shortstop by the name of Jason Donald. First 2 pitches, it's a 1-1 count. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then history happens. I don't know if you have the play pulled up in front of you.
I don't, but this play, like, I remember it. Like,
it's gonna make you mad.
I just remember.
What do you remember, Mikey?
So the thing I remember the most is right after the play, he steps on first base, and then you just see Armando Galarraga's face. Like, you just see the joy gone from his face. He's like, what? Like, he's like, that's not supposed to happen. I got this dude out. Like, dude, I feel so bad for him just now.
Yeah, it's tough to watch. So the umpire, the first base umpire, his name is Jim Joyce. At that point, he had been calling big league games for 22 years. He had a really good reputation up until that point, of course. And he ruled him safe. And there was no replay back then. At that point, the only thing you could replay was disputes about boundaries on home run calls, but there were no challenges, and you couldn't look at a ground ball out like this at that point. So his final stat line on that day, he obviously goes 9 innings, no runs. He allows 1 hit. He only had 3 strikeouts for the whole game.
Wow.
And he threw 88 pitches. That's it.
Yo, so he had like a Maddox?
67 of those were strikes. And now let me give you a stat that's going to make you even more upset. His 83 pitches would have been the fewest pitches in a perfect game since 1908. He had 83 pitches, and it would have ended in a perfect game. So after the game, Jim Joyce admitted immediately that he made a mistake. He said, quote, "I did not get the call correct." He insisted that he, quote, "took a perfect game away from that kid over there that worked his ass off all night." Joyce called it, quote, "the biggest call of my career. I thought Donald beat the throw. I was convinced he beat the throw until I saw the replay." Which, common thread here. Galarraga himself said Joyce, quote, "probably feels more bad than me." He ironically said, "Nobody's perfect. Everyone's human."
I feel like, I don't know, maybe conspiracy theory. Jason Donald paid off Jim Joyce because he's running harder. I don't know. I'm just saying, I guess if it's an older dude, like if you got like a guy who's been around the block, he probably like runs hard, but he's not like running hard. You know what I mean?
Basically, to wrap things up, to this day, the Tigers have still never had a perfect game. Although since then, Verlander threw 2 no-hitters while he was still with the Tigers. But they had, other than that, no no-hitters and no perfect games. And an interesting tidbit I want to end this on is there are opponents today, not opponents like baseball opponents, but there's still people out there today that are arguing against changing the ruling to make it a perfect game because they believe the notoriety of a near perfect game is in itself a different kind of reward, and thereby overturning the decision would cause the game to be forgotten. Any closing thoughts before we sign off?
No, I mean, Armando Galarraga deserved it, but he probably is better for not getting it. I guess that's my final thought.
All right. Well, that's all we have for Spoiled. Back to you in the studio.
Welcome back to the Box Score. There isn't a single NFL team over the past decade that has been more dominant than the New England Patriots. But with Tom Brady down in Tampa, the Patriots' struggling defense, and their underwhelming offense, football fans are starting to question whether or not this is a season that Bill Belichick will be able to save. Here to debate whether or not the Pats will even crack the playoffs are resident NFL experts Sam DaCosta and Jacqueline Galvin. Sam, you're up first.
The Patriots are not Super Bowl contenders in 2020, but that isn't the question, Jacqueline. The question is, will the Patriots make the playoffs in 2020? And the answer is yes. The Patriots have undergone an offseason of so much transition that it's going to take time for them to settle down and find their identity. Cam Newton is not Tom Brady, but Newton is a former MVP, and he plays the game differently. He's becoming acquainted with life in New England in a new system, and Josh McDaniels will find a way to utilize Cam to suit his strengths. The defense will settle down, especially after Thanksgiving. Did we also forget that the Patriots lost a few players to COVID at the quarter season mark? COVID sidelined Newton for a game and even forced the Pats to take an early bye week. They've been through a lot in 2020, as we all have, but everyone, it's week 9, half the season is left. Do we seriously believe the Patriots will finish below 500 and won't make it to the playoffs? I don't know about that.
Well, you make some good points, Sam. But Jacqueline, the floor is yours.
On March 17th, 2020, my soul as a Patriot fan was crushed. The quarterback who has led my team literally since I was born left. But after a few months of grieving, I decided that I trust Bill Belichick. Prefacing what I am about to say, I still trust Bill Belichick and his ability to create an incredible playoff team. Just not this year. Cam Newton has sucked. I guess a lasting effect of COVID-19 is being bad at football. He makes horrible decisions and will be the reason that the Patriots do not make it into this expanded playoffs. Now, he is definitely not the only reason, but the QB room in New England is so weak. It is painful to watch Patriot football these past few weeks. Unless the Patriots get a new quarterback, which will not happen, or Cam Newton decides he actually wants to play football correctly, which is what has to happen but is even less likely, then the Patriots will not make the playoffs this season.
All right, guys, there's some great points on both sides, but now let's open it up to debate. As these two argue, our out-of-studio jury will cast their votes, and when you hear my buzzer, it means that all the votes have been cast. Guys, when you're ready.
So I just want to bring up a few stats specifically on Cam Newton. Since he has returned from being out with COVID, he has had 0 touchdown throws, 5 interceptions, 3 fumbles, one of which was lost. He's been sacked 7 times, and the Patriots have had an 0-3 record. I really think that Cam Newton is one of the major aspects of this team that needs to heavily improve before the Patriots could even consider themselves a playoff contender. And the past 3 weeks, I just haven't seen that in him. He keeps saying, you know, I'm going to do better. I take full account for this. But then nothing happens and nothing gets better.
Well, the team is more than Cam Newton. And let's not forget, the Patriots were a fumble away from beating the Buffalo Bills in the AFC East, and that would have changed the whole division equation. I know they're 2-5. They've lost some games that they really shouldn't have. The Broncos loss was ugly, and they probably could have won the Bills game on Sunday, but the Patriots are really close. They're just losing close games. And also in the Bills game, they had Stephon Gilmore and Julian Edelman out, probably their two best players, not named Cam Newton. And when they get them back, they're probably going to be a much better team. And their schedule, they have the Jets twice. Those are 2 bye weeks. Those are 2 wins. The Cardinals are on their schedule. They're beatable. The Texans are 1-6.
So wait, did you say the Cardinals are beatable?
They're beatable.
Well, I don't know about that.
They lost to the Lions
not know
this
about
season.
that.
Listen,
Yeah, but then they absolutely came back from in that Seahawks game and ended up winning that game.
Listen,
so.
also, this is an expanded playoff field. You have 7
Yeah,
teams in the
but-
playoffs now. You have to finish above the Browns without Odell Beckham. You have to finish above the Chargers and Dolphins with rookie quarterbacks. The Colts with a 38-year-old quarterback, Phillip Rivers. They're definitely, it's in the cards for the Patriots. The season's not over. And it's also November. Thanksgiving hasn't even happened yet. The Patriots win after Thanksgiving. That is when they make their bread and butter. It's not in October.
Okay, foreseeably in the future, they can win, in my opinion, 4 games. Both of the Jets games, the Texans possibly, and the Chargers. I don't think they beat the Ravens at all. I don't think they beat the Cardinals. They don't beat the Rams. They definitely don't beat the Dolphins with Tua. And the Bills, they'll lose to again.
They almost beat the Bills last week.
the
They were
key word
20
there
yards
was
away from
almost.
beating the Buffalo Bills.
Yes, they were 20 yards away from beating the Buffalo Bills, and then Cam Newton fumbled the ball because he was holding it in the wrong hand.
Also,
How
remember
elementary do you
the
have
Chiefs
to be
game?
to hold that in the wrong hand?
When they started Brian Hoyer, they had the Chiefs, the Super Bowl champs, on the ropes, and their defense held them to just 1 touchdown the whole game. And then Brian Hoyer did what Brian Hoyer does, suck. And then the Patriots didn't win that game.
But that's
the
what
Patriots,
this quarterback room does. They just all suck.
The
They
Patriots-
are so bad to watch. It makes me pain. My whole body is in pain whenever I watch a Patriot quarterback this season, and it sucks because that hasn't been an issue in the past. Now, moving from the quarterback position, I do want to talk about the defense because the defense in the past few weeks, I mean, they lost to the Broncos. Are you kidding me? Chase Winovich's snap count has gone way down. He only had 5 snaps against the Buffalo Bills, which is ridiculous. They're 27th against the rush, and also Gilmore has looked a shell of his former self. He's the reigning defensive MVP? Yeah, right. He does not look like it, and I think he could honestly be gone at the trade deadline, which this show will be coming out after.
Well, the Patriots defense is obviously not what they used to be, but they've also had a lot of opt-outs. So they're still getting used to the roster that they have right now. It's been a rough spell for the defense. They don't have Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower. Gilmore didn't play in the game against the Bills. And they did pretty well against the Bills, who already have Stephon Diggs, John Brown, and Cole Beasley. And moving away from the defense, their offense has been pretty solid, at least in the game against the Bills. They had 188 rushing yards. Jacoby Myers and Damiere Byrd made some great plays against Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer. The Bills have a really good secondary, and the Patriots moved the ball all game long against this defense. This team isn't a Super Bowl contender, but they're still going to be a playoff contender because you only have to be better than a few teams that really have a lot of exploitable weaknesses, and their schedule, it's hard, but it's not impossible for them to make the playoffs again.
It's definitely not impossible, but I think that the Bills kind of have the AFC East locked. Then they have to make it into a wild card
Not the
spot.
division, though. They don't have to win the division to make the playoffs. They
No,
only have
but
to be one of the top 7
I
teams in the AFC.
The Dolphins beat the Rams, a very good contender. Patriots will not, if the Patriots continue to play the way that they do, making these silly mistakes, getting all of these penalties that have been pushing them back to 2nd and 15, 2nd and 20, 3rd and 15, 3rd and 20, then they are not playing playoff caliber football, and they honestly shouldn't make the playoffs if they keep playing this way. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I don't want to watch a Cam Newton-led Patriots team that looks like absolute garbage right now in the playoffs.
I'm just saying, it's not even Thanksgiving yet. Bill Belichick can be counted on to coach and get the most out of his players when he needs them most. Even in the Super Bowl years, the Patriots didn't always have the best roster, but Bill Belichick got the most out of them. Even with this weak roster, the Patriots are still playoff favorites, and with Thanksgiving not even here, half the season's left, the Patriots will be just fine. Just give it time. Trust Bill Belichick. He will get it done for you.
All right, well, guys, the votes are in. And when we come back, we'll hear each side's closing argument, one last chance to sway the jury, and we'll find out who will be tonight's buzzer beater champion. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back. To round out this installment of Buzzer Beater, let's hear each side's closing arguments. Sam?
The Patriots forge a different identity every season, and right now, they're still figuring it out. The offseason marked a period of transition for the New England Patriots, pivoting to a change in philosophy to Cam Newton at quarterback and a defense which lost key players to opt-outs. Not to mention, this team had a considerable COVID scare, forcing them to start Brian Hoyer in a game. The Patriots will right the ship. And by the way, the NFL expanded the playoffs to 7 teams per conference this season. The AFC has another playoff spot for the taking. Look at who the Patriots have to finish above. The Cleveland Browns without Odell Beckham, Indianapolis Colts with a 38-year-old Phillip Rivers, the Miami Dolphins led by a rookie quarterback, the Las Vegas Raiders. I like to think that the Pats will have one of the top 7 records in the AFC when the season is over. Call me crazy. The Patriots won't make it to the Super Bowl, but they are going to make the playoffs. You don't have to agree with me. You can sleep on the Patriots just like everyone has for the past 20 years, but underestimate Bill Belichick and the Patriots at your own peril. He will make you eat your words.
All right, Jacqueline, let's hear it.
Buffalo is winning the AFC East, and there are at least 7 other teams that have a higher likelihood of making the playoffs before the Patriots as of right now in the season. In a normal season, the Pats always have a chance with Bill Belichick, but opt-outs incredibly hurt the Patriots this season, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, as well as key players leaving in free agency. I don't trust this Patriots team as much as I did last year, even when Brady wasn't having a great season. COVID basically ruined Cam Newton's momentum, and the outbreak on the team definitely did not help an already struggling Patriots team. Overall, even with the expanded playoffs, the New England Patriots will not make the playoffs for only the 3rd time in my lifetime, which is a shame.
Well, guys, the votes are finalized, and congrats to Sam for your first buzzer beater win of the season. Now for our final segment of the night, we'll hear from our loser, Jacqueline Galvin, one last time for her thoughts on the infamous Los Angeles Dodger, Justin Turner. Jacqueline, take it away.
Thanks, Hannah. In the midst of a global pandemic, everyone needs something to root for. For the city of Los Angeles, that was the Dodger and the Lakers championships. But selfishness took over the narrative, specifically the selfishness of Justin Turner. Turner tested positive for the coronavirus during Game 6 of the World Series. The Dodgers pulled him and then ended up winning the World Series later that night. And Turner was out on the field celebrating his World Series win with his team. Maskless at times, kissing his wife while the league said that he was in isolation. Who allowed him on the field? This brings a whole other issue into play: selfishness. I get it. Turner has been so close for so long, and he didn't want COVID to ruin his time of glory celebrating with his team. But look at the bigger picture. You are carrying a deadly virus. Have you not learned anything from Eduardo Rodriguez? He has heart issues after contracting it. You aren't immune because you are a professional athlete. Life emulates sports. Turner, you set an example to the American people whether you mean to or not. People will think, well, I didn't win a World Series, but my homecoming is coming up, and if Justin Turner can celebrate his World Series win while having COVID, then I should be able to celebrate my senior year homecoming with my friends in person when I don't even have COVID. Also, how could Major League Baseball let this happen? MLB has had so much bad press recently, and I'm not just talking about COVID-19 cases. This World Series win should have been remarkable. MLB pulled off the impossible, supposedly, but not anymore. The conversation shifted from a World Series title to a mishap of magnum proportion, and I don't know who to blame. Obviously, Turner should not have been on the field, but I imagine that emotions take over when you become a World Series champion. The bigger issue I see is no one from Major League Baseball staff stopped him. This PR fiasco could have been easily avoided if someone had stepped in and just said no. Turner and MLB, stop doing the most. Set an example for Americans to follow. And coronavirus, you really need to stop doing the most. Go away, please. It's time to get back to normal life and to view live sports the right way without putting the lives of players, coaches, staff, and fans at risk. With that being said, stay safe, wear a mask, and don't pull a Justin Turner. Back to you, Hannah.
That's all the time we have for today. This has been the Box Score. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll catch you next time.